This episode contains difficult material, including issues relating to suicide, suicide ideation, and mental health that could be distressing for some listeners.
This is Carrie Offstein-Rosenthal, and this is the podcast Held.
My love, you left me in the summertime, and all the leaves were on their trees, and all the flowers still smell
Welcome back.
sweet.
Today, we're going to take a look at how Zach and Mike came to the understanding that it was indeed Angie who gave birth to Zach. So, Mike, when did you realize that Angie was the biological mother?
Based on his age, I dated Angie, and his appearance, dark complected, 99% sure it was Angie.
At what point did you communicate that to Zach?
After talking, and then we spoke often after that, I said, I think I know who your biological mom is. I'm at least 99% sure. And then my daughter told me you can go online and you can find anyone's high school picture. There's some website. I looked up Angie and I sent it and I said, I think this is your biological mom.
And Zach, walk us through how you remember it.
I would say 2 days later, I'm at work and Michael texted me saying, I think I know who the birth mother is. Mm-hmm. He said, I might have said I'm 98, 99% sure I know who it is. So I immediately step out of the office into the parking lot and I'm like, okay, who is it? And he sent me a link and he showed me a picture and he's like, I'm pretty sure this is who it is. And it was Angie.
So then what happened? So you find out it's Angie. Do you start researching her? Like, what happens next?
Yeah, I started researching her on my own. And then I had a couple people that, were very knowledgeable into what was going on. So we sent them the picture and the information, but we started doing research, but I didn't want to email or reach out to this woman because we weren't 100% sure. And I didn't want to start messaging people and it being the wrong person. Like, what are you talking about? Ruining people's lives potentially. So I started going through the state process of getting my records back. And you can imagine how crazy that is, sending 25-cent checks to the state to make copies. And it was a whole mess.
How long did it take you to find out who your biological mother was?
April 5th when I had the conversation.
Okay.
And it was, like I said, probably 2 days later. 2 or 3 days later, it seemed like that me and Mike were on the phone talking about this.
And Mike, were you concerned about telling Zach about Angie? And if so, what were your concerns?
I wasn't hesitating. I mean, obviously there had to be another person involved in this. With that being said, I thought it would be Angie, remembering 35 years ago and putting myself back in that time.
Well, to that end, how old were you when Zach was born?
About 18 years old.
A freshman in college?
Yes.
You're in college, and do you have any interaction with Angie at this point? Like, do you call her? Do you see her when you come home from school over the breaks? Did you see her that summer?
I feel like we saw each other a couple times, but it's I'm not really too sure.
The point is, if you noticed she was pregnant, you would have noticed she was pregnant, and you did not.
Well, I did not. I don't recall noticing anything really different.
And when you talked to her, you didn't notice anything different. Like, you didn't notice that she seemed standoffish or more pissed off or more just anything. Did you notice anything?
No, and it kills me that I was so oblivious and did not know what was going on. Really, when you think about how I felt, I felt really bad that I wasn't there for Angie at the time, that she was dealing with all this on her own at such a young age, that she had this huge burden of knowing this and just dealing with all this by herself, that I couldn't be there to support or knew she was even pregnant.
And so were you angry at all? The fact that she had a baby and didn't tell you?
I wouldn't use the word angry. I guess I was more overwhelmed. And again, I use the word shock. But again, I wish I could have been there. But I mean, she, in hindsight, I didn't have to live with the unknown, not knowing what happened to the baby, where the baby was, and living with that for 35 years.
Was there ever a moment when you all were together where you were like, oh shit, we might have just had a baby? Did you ever have a conversation like that?
I don't, and we did use protection, and I didn't recall a time where, something happened, it broke, or we had a discussion that she missed her period.
How did you feel about telling people? Your friends, your family? Angie's family is from St. Louis, so did you feel like you had to kind of keep it on the down low, even though you live in California now? I don't know if you still have family in St. Louis.
My mom and older sister live in St. Louis still. I had no problem telling people about the situation. I told my mom, and she was very excited about it. I mean, she loved it. My mom is friends with Angie's parents.
So you felt fine about telling people. And what was the response of your friends and people who knew you when you were in college and high school, who you told?
Some of them said, she gave away your baby. Others like, you're lucky you didn't have that burden to carry for the last 35 years, worrying about what happened to the baby. And so it was mixed.
So, Zach, I want to now talk about the call with Angie. So you find out on April 5th who your biological father is.
Correct.
How long did it take to confirm, really, that Angie was your biological mother?
Well, I got a big package in the mail from the state probably 2 days after I got back from St. Louis. And I'm like, oh, my God, here it is. And we were going to videotape me opening it and finding out. And then it was just more garbage from the state explaining the process and more information I had to fill out. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be another 2 years. But I'm not sure how, maybe it was a month after that. I don't know exactly the exact date.
So let's say, well, actually, I think it was in July, because I'm assuming you contacted Angie pretty shortly after you got the information.
A week maybe after.
All right. So I'm going to say mid-July, you got the information from the state. And
because after I found out for sure, we started doing some hard research. We started calling contacts here and there, see if anybody's heard of these people. What's their deal? We started gathering phone numbers. There weren't a lot of phone numbers out there for Angie. We started compiling all these numbers. I did an Excel sheet on all these numbers that we kept finding. They didn't provide a number, but They did provide on that birth certificate the parents' names. So we knew all that. We didn't know who was alive, who wasn't, but we found out, like I said, where Angie was working or had worked.
So you went on the internet and you found out that she worked and she lived in Colorado, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And so how did you decide to make the call, and how did that go?
When we got these numbers together, we were also talking to Michael and Sydney. They were helping us with phone numbers, like, oh, we think we found another number, try this. The plan that me and Roshki decided, and we also talked to Michael and Sydney about it, is that I wasn't going to make the initial call in case she wanted to have nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to put her on the spot and make her be like, you got to talk to me now. I thought a slow approach to it. So we decided to let Roshki, who we felt she would be the perfect person to make that intro. So Roshki had the daunting task of going through number by number. And I was, sitting over here saying, okay, did that number work? What was that? Was that her? Was that him? Was that? So I think we probably came to about 10 different numbers. The first call was to her work, and they said that she no longer worked there. And we tried asking for were forwarding numbers, personal numbers. They would not relinquish any information to us. So that was a dead end. So we marked that off and we just went down the list. And finally, we came to a number that was answered by Randy Hoffman.
Rashki, what do you remember about the call?
Finally, the records came and it came back, Angie. Okay, well, now we can reach out to her. No one had her contact information. I guess if we just asked, we probably could have gotten it pretty easily. We wanted to do it on our own. We didn't want Michael to have to get involved. We just, again, started Googling and we found a whole list of numbers. Honestly, there were like a lot of numbers out there on the internet. We decided that I would be the one to call because we wanted to give her the opportunity to say, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to talk to him. I just started calling numbers. And at one point, Randy answered one of the numbers. And so I hung up and I was like, okay, this is the number. And so after a couple of days, like, again, we didn't know what to do. We didn't want to mess up someone's life. So after a few days, Zach's like, just do it. He was like, forget it. And so I called and that's when I spoke to Randy.
So as I mentioned earlier, Randy is my older brother, one of two, and we're going to meet him right now. So Randy, hello. Let's start with a little background. What is your relationship to Angie?
Angie and I have been married for 26 years.
And when did you meet?
Sometime in junior high school. I don't remember the exact moment.
Do you have any children?
Now we do.
But you do not have any children with Angie?
I do not, no. We do not.
So just for a little background, what was Angie like in high school? And you're allowed to tell me, she told me.
I mean, she was a good friend. We were always friendly in high school. Our friendship grew. We ended up going to senior prom together. Obviously, you knew that. Friendship grew more in college, and, we had maintained our friendship as we both went away to college, and it grew from there. High school, what was she like? We just had a big group of friends. We were all kind of like-minded. We liked to party, have a good time. We were drinkers at the time. We just, we liked hanging out with friends, and it was just fun high school times.
Was there any point in high school, before you knew this, obviously, but was there any time in high school that you noticed any significant changes in her? Were you ever worried about her in high school?
No. She wasn't the best student. Other than that, I wasn't worried. And I can't say I was actually worried about that, but, knowing she wasn't utilizing her full potential.
Ooh, I like that. Was there ever talk amongst your friends of any concern for her? Like, had you heard any rumors in high school? Never.
Nothing. That's one of the craziest pieces of all this, I think. It's like, we have told this story to many people, including a lot of high school friends who we were all very close and hung out, and nobody had any idea. And it's shocking to me, and always has been. And I know as we've told this story, it is shocking to other people that we grew up with.
So this is really a part of that, but so you never knew or suspected she was pregnant at any point?
Never.
Did you know any other friends in your group? I guess you don't want to out anybody, but did you know of anybody else in your larger social circle who was pregnant ever, or?
There were some girls in high school who were pregnant. I wouldn't say I was really close with them, or they really weren't in my, close knit group of friends.
You didn't know of any people who, like, for example, had abortions?
I didn't, but in this whole conversation, I think Angie knows of some others.
Yeah, I do too. So that's why it's interesting from the male perspective. How and when did Angie tell you she had a child?
I'm assuming it's when we lived in Boulder from like 93 to 95.
So before you were married?
Definitely before we were married. I know for a fact that she told me before we were married. Specifically when, I don't know. I can't tell you if it was before we lived together, if it's when we were just dating, but it was certainly before we got married.
And do you remember the effect that knowledge had on you?
I don't recall specifically, but I can tell you I just kind of took it in. I didn't, it didn't have a huge impact on me.
Is that because you thought that you would not ever, it would just never come into play? Because obviously, just take this the way in which I mean it, it's not like it would have surprised you that your group of friends were sexually active in high school. So that part couldn't have surprised you. It was really simply that contraception didn't work.
I can't recall when exactly it happened, but I don't know. And I'm saying all this because, it could have been early in our relationship. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's not going to affect me. Maybe we weren't at that point in our relationship. Or maybe we were living together and looking at possibly getting married. And at that point, my way of thinking about it was, because I was always told a somewhat evasive story with not a lot of detail. And, my take on it at the time was, yes, it was part of her past, but it is never going to come into play in our future together.
Yes. At the time, did you ask her how she felt? Did you know it was a significant thing or a difficult thing or anything? Or did she just say, I need to let you know that I had a child and gave it up for adoption? And was that the extent of the conversation as you recall it?
Looking back, I'm starting to feel bad because I really didn't give it a lot of thought. I remember we had the conversation, it was mentioned, and we didn't talk about it very often at the time or really after the fact. In hindsight, we should have quite a bit more. At 22 years old at the time, or 24 or whatever it was, once again, not knowing the exact circumstances, I feel like I absorbed it and we kind of just moved on and moved forward, and it really wasn't a part of our lives.
And when she told you, were you surprised?
I think I was more surprised that nobody had ever known. And when she told me the story that she had carried the baby to term while we were all in high school together, that was probably the more shocking aspect of it than anything.
When she was telling you about having the child square with what you had observed about Angie's personality in general, it sounds like you didn't give it much thought.
I really didn't. I wish now that this is all coming about, I feel like I kind of dismissed it all. Which apparently
you were
I did,
20. You were 20.
We'll
give you
I'm using that as an excuse. No, I didn't give it a lot of thought.
And did it ever come up in your conversations again?
Occasionally, but not on any type of regular basis. I know Angie's mentioned, like on his birthday, thinking about it. Maybe she had mentioned it, but I don't recall any specifics. I mean, what I recall is she's like, I have a 30-year-old somewhere out there, or 20 or whatever, just in passing. And I'm not even sure, we obviously know his birthday now. Angie has always known it. I'm not sure I really knew that or absorbed that. To know that, okay, on November the 1st, however many years ago, there was a baby born.
Did you ever suspect it was difficult for her? I mean, just even in passing at that point?
No. Once again, I feel very guilty about that, but no. I don't know if it was just being selfish or self-absorbed or what, but.
What was it like to be on the inside of a secret like that? And what I mean by that is you got married, you're very close to your family. I happen to know because I'm your sister. What was it like to have to harbor that, or did you just never think about it ever?
I in general, no, I didn't give it a lot of thought, as far as you and mom are concerned, or maybe Michael or dad. There was times that I thought about telling you, but it's just nothing that I was going to do. Angie had told me in confidence. I didn't see the relevance of it. Outside of informing you what it would have truly accomplished outside of, pissing her off.
Right. Did you ever suggest she seek help? It sounds like you didn't know she needed any help with that.
Well, I think generally speaking, I have, but that might be, unrelated to the baby specifically.
So Randy, the day you received the phone call, can you just walk us through that day? Just like where you were, what happened?
They called my business line and they asked for Angie, and that's not a common occurrence. So immediately I was a little suspicious, because normally when that happens, it's a sales call or, someone who, doesn't really know Angie, or else they probably wouldn't have called my business. So I was a little bit suspicious, they were asking for Angie, and I'm not, I wasn't rude, I don't think. I was just she's not here. I'm happy to take a message. And we started, and then she's like, well, I could tell she was trying to get at something. And, at some point I asked, look, can I ask what this is in regards to? And, little did I know what kind of response I would get to that. I'm not even sure what I thought she was calling about. And as I asked, what is this in regards to? She's like, look, I hope this doesn't come as a shock, but I am calling on behalf of Angie's biological son. Okay. Which I probably had that type of response because while it was shocking, I knew about it. And I think I told Roshki that. I was like, yes, I was aware. It is shocking, I think I said to her, but, I'm aware. I can't, I don't know what Angie, how she's going to react or what she will want to do, but I will definitely pass along the message. And I appreciate you calling. And it means a lot to me to hear, because I think she then said that just so you know, he had a wonderful life, was raised in a wonderful family. Because that was important to me, and it was the end all be all for Angie when she first heard that. When I was ending that call, I heard Angie come home. Like she came home and the dog had been barking, and so I knew she had come home, and I was finishing up this call and she was coming in and getting settled in or whatever. Then the phone call ended, and I am like, well, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to go talk to Angie. And I didn't really have a plan in mind on how, but 5 minutes later or so, we sat down, or I said, hey, have a seat. And that in itself, is probably, she was like, probably a little concerned because, I think I was in a pretty serious mood. It wasn't joking around. I was like, look, I need to talk to you about something.
Yeah.
And we sat down, and I just, I didn't know, I didn't really think about sugarcoating it or anything. I think I just said, hey, I may have even said, hey, I don't know how to really tell you this outside of just telling you this, but I just got a call from the wife of your biological son. And she was like in shock, basically. Like, how did this just happen on so many levels?
When you got that phone call, obviously you were thinking about Angie. I'm assuming you were what were you thinking about?
Yeah, I was thinking about Angie, and, this is, how is this going to impact her life and our lives? I didn't give it a lot of thought, but I just knew it was a major piece of information that, I didn't really know how she would react. We had never really spoken about it.
And did your was your heart pounding as you got this information? Like when it,
really.
Okay. So it was really, very matter of fact.
Very matter of fact. Yes. It was not a lot of emotion just because I felt like it, maybe it hadn't set in. It was more, I'm going to relay this information to her, try to just be there and be supportive of her and see how she reacts. Because it's kind of, it wasn't really about me. I was kind of just the messenger. I was actually, without getting into how Angie, I was glad that, when I told her that her reaction was like, I'm going to call Roshki pretty much immediately.
What did you observe of Angie when you told her? She
was shocked. She was very emotional for many reasons. She was shocked and emotional. And, as I think I mentioned before, I think about the only thing I really said with any detail is that he was raised in a loving family by wonderful parents.
And how did she respond to that?
Oh, she broke up. It was like, that was for her, that was everything. That's all I think she ever wanted. And while I think I knew that, it was reinforced 1,000 times that day.
Okay, Roshki, now it's time. Tell me about that phone call. Was your heart beating out of your head? Like, I would have been so nervous.
Yeah, I probably disassociated a little bit. Like I was really nervous, but I think I just became much more turned on my social worker hat at that point. And I just said, is your wife Angie? And he was, yeah, I think, my husband, she's my husband's biological mother. And he was like, oh, okay. He's like, oh, wow. And so I said, obviously, this is really a sensitive subject and, difficult. And so I wanted to reach out before and make sure that she wanted to have this conversation with him and wanted to connect. And he was like, okay, she's not home right now, but let me give her your information. She'll call you back. And then right before we hung up, I said, did you know about this? Because that was our concern, that he didn't even know. And he said, yes, I did. And I was like, oh, thank God.
So, Angie, can you tell us about that day? What was going on?
I call it a death and a rebirth. I got dressed with the intent to work out. I had on my workout clothes, never made it to the workout. I remember every little detail about that day. I remember the errands I was running. I was wearing orange leggings, a white top, black and white tennis shoes, and a jean jacket around my waist. I remember having a deep conversation with my sister that day. A lot of little random details that I really have no business remembering, but I do. I recall driving home, calling my husband. I remember walking in the house. I remember there was a look on his face, and I remember him saying, I just got a phone call. I knew it wasn't a normal phone call just based on his face. And I said, do I need to sit down? And he said, yes. He said, Angie, I just got a phone call from the wife of your 35-year-old son. And he's happy and he's healthy and he has been loved his entire life. And he has 2 children. And he doesn't want anything from you. He just wants you to know that he is alive and well. And if you want a relationship with him, he is willing and able. If not, that's fine too. Rashki is Zach's wife. Zach is my son. And she asked Randy if I was interested to call her back. In those moments of Randy telling me that information, I felt my world, my life, everything just come crashing down. It felt like an explosion of my emotions and my physical being. It felt otherworldly. I had a really hard time keeping it together, but yet I was dying to pick up the phone and call Rashki. Finally, after just a lot of tears and just trying to breathe, I did call her back. She told me basically the same things that Randy did and asked if I would want to FaceTime and meet my son that evening. And as much as I did not want to, as much as it was the very last thing on the face of the earth I actually wanted to do, it was also the very first thing I wanted to do.
Why did you not want to do it?
For 35 years, this baby was out there, a nameless, a faceless, a genderless baby that, it was just easy for me to just keep on going for all of those years without having that face, a voice, or any inklings of who this human might be. And I knew that once I saw him, that I would just be in love with him and there would be no going back. And yet so much of me just wanted to not have received that phone call and just go back to my regular life. But, it was this incredible push and pull. I was dying to know him, and the fact that I had grandchildren, but yet all I wanted to do was just get in bed and hide.
Why do you think you wanted to hide?
This secret, this burden, this weight, I don't even know what to call it, the shame, all of that came exploding to me in that day, in those moments, processing things that I had not ever processed, feeling things I had never, ever allowed myself to feel, and recognizing that I was really I was really losing my shit in a way that I would not be able to help myself like I could in the past.
So when you say you're losing your shit, can you describe that? No, it's not easy.
You hear the term nervous breakdown, and you don't really know what that term means. You just think it's someone who's gone crazy. And honestly, that is nervous breakdown. That is what happened to me. It felt like I didn't even know how to tie a shoe or put a spoon to my mouth. It felt like every single thing had changed, had died. And yet my brain was just going a million miles an hour. Who knew this information? Would the birth father find out? Would I have to tell my friends and family? Could I just pick up my belongings and run? Should I take some pills? I quickly realized that I was really accessing those teenage feelings, and full well in my adult brain knowing that I would never do anything like that. I would never pick up my things and leave this life. I was just reverting back to the only way I knew how to protect myself.
But what was the day that is your birthday / death day?
July 26th of 2021. And, it's interesting because I did have those very strong feelings of mourning and just nonstop sobbing. And Randy would say, Angie, I'm really worried. Like, no one has died. And I kept in my head thinking, my God, he is so right. Like, why am I acting like a death has occurred? And then it wasn't until later that I realized a death actually did occur. The death of this secret that was now out there, whether I liked it or not. There was no more putting it in this box and leaving it on the side. I now had to deal with things that I have not, feelings, emotions, events. I had to now really process this because I have a son and a daughter-in-law and grandchildren. And if for no other reason, I need to handle this for them, because as much as I was grieving and as much as I was having this nervous breakdown, there was really nothing that gave me more joy than thinking about this man and his wife and their beautiful children. And during those dark days, didn't want to talk to anyone or see anyone or face anything. But he would text or call, and I would jump to the phone and answer it on the first ring. And I remember being very confused because I wanted to get so far away from him, but I wanted to just be so close at the same time.
How long was it between when you spoke to Randy, your husband, and you called Rashti back? How long did that take?
That was several hours before I could really gain some composure. I said to her immediately, look, I am an emotional mess. I will be crying the whole time we speak. And of course she understood and was lovely and gracious. So I'd say several hours later, and then we set up a FaceTime call for that night.
What was the conversation with your husband, Randy, like when this came about before you spoke to Zach?
I had told Randy the story in a nutshell. We had never discussed any details. And that day we did talk about a lot of things that he did not know. The first thing we talked about was just the immediate future, which was, should I call Rashti back? Should we FaceTime with Zach? And I just kept saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And his response was, we're doing it. We're doing it. You don't have to call him back. You don't have to call her back. But now you know. And there's no going back from that. You can either get to know them and move on, or you can just accept that this man is out there and move on. He said, but Angie, I know you, and I know your heart, and I know that one day, someday, he'll be your favorite thing in this world. Randy and I decided to make that call together. We were both very, very nervous. I'm sure me more than him. We had an idea of what they look like. I, of course, got onto Facebook and did a little private investigating. The first picture that I pulled up of Zach, I remember throwing the phone. It was so mind-blowing to me how much this man looked like my father. And in that moment, had I ever had a question that Rashki was who she said she was, looking at that picture of him solidified it. And I couldn't wait to get on the phone. And Randy saying, oh my God, what just happened? What's wrong? And I could barely show him this picture. It was so uncanny, the resemblance. We did decide, yeah, we want to see these people. We want to meet these people. And it didn't take but just a split second, if even that, for me to lay my eyes on him and decide I needed to meet this man in person.
What was that first phone call like?
It was one of those phone calls where I just felt like at any moment I was going to wake up, because the things that were being said to me weren't completely computing. We got on FaceTime with them. They were lovely and sweet. And Zach just began by telling me his story. Zach told me his whole story. And I remember listening to him and digesting it, but also at the same time, just not being able to fully pay attention, because I just was staring at every part of him that I could see over FaceTime. He looked very much like me, very much like his birth father. He is without a doubt, just perfect in every way. That first phone call, my takeaway was that I had never met someone so big-hearted before. He was comforting me in a way that probably only he could have. I apologized a million times for giving him up, and his comeback to me was, thank you for giving me up. I've lived an incredible life. You don't owe me any apologies. I told him my story. I told him my truth that night. And he was just so supportive and so heartwarming and made me feel so much better. But he was very well spoken and, as I said, just very sweet and supportive. And, look, if you ever want to meet or if you want to take this further, but no pressure. And I just want you to know how much I was loved. And it was just a very heartwarming, incredible conversation. I cried the entire time, not pretty tears either. Everyone else kept it together. I wish I could have kept it together a little bit more, but I wanted to know so much more about him. I wanted to know everything about him in that one conversation. We did share with him, a little bit about our lives.
What was the very first thing that ran through your head when you found out that he was a boy? Because until that time, you hadn't known that. And so, like, in your heart, had you thought it was a girl?
I had always felt like he was a boy. Always felt like he was a boy. During the time that I was pregnant, these last 35 years, every once in a while, I would think to myself, God, I wonder what this human looks like. And I could never picture a female. Always in my head, it was always, I was picturing a boy, a man.
Rashki, what is your memory of that conversation?
She called me back like, I don't know, 45 minutes, 30 minutes later, just crying already. And then I spoke to her.
Did her crying surprise you? Did her response to the information surprise you, I guess?
No, I don't know. I guess it would take a lot to surprise me. No, it didn't surprise me. It was a very emotional, genuine conversation that I had with her.
What did you guys talk about?
So I started out by saying, I just want you to know that he has had a great life, that, he is happy, that he has great parents. We've been married 13 years. We have 2 children. And she just started crying. She was just like, I've had so much guilt. I don't regret my decision because I did what I had to do, for myself and for this child. But I've, carried so much guilt, and that gives me so much relief. And I explained how, I wanted, he wanted to talk to her, but we wanted to give her the opportunity to say no if she didn't want to open that door. And she was like, yes, he deserves to have that conversation, as do I. And yeah, it was a very heavy it was a short conversation. It was heavy. She said, of course he can call me, we can talk. And later I texted her, can we all FaceTime? And so we scheduled a FaceTime for that night, I think, also. But it was, it was intense. Whereas with Michael, it was very light, and it was like, okay, with her, it was heavy. You felt the emotion.
Yeah. What was your response to that emotion? For example, I guess what I'm getting at is, if someone has a lot of emotion and you're not there, he's not yet emotionally connected. He has had a great life. He hasn't had any pain really related to this adoption. And he sees that somehow he is involved with all this emotion. Was he like, I want to step back from this, it's too much? Was he nervous? No.
He was nervous. I mean, he was nervous throughout the whole, process, but no, what he said from the beginning was he had his whole life to process it and to know. And so, yes, every step was a new experience and was nerve-wracking. He got nervous, he got overwhelmed, but it wasn't something that he wanted to run away from.
And Zach, how did all of this go down for you?
We set up a FaceTime for that evening. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I don't know if she knew what my name was or anything. Mm-hmm. I kind of wanted to see the shock in her face when she found out my last name.
So you're on that first conversation with her. You haven't met her yet. Rashki has.
Correct.
And she sees you for the first time. You're on.
Yeah.
FaceTime. Tell me
and
about
of course, we had been stalking her for the past however long. So we had an idea of what she looked like. So we weren't totally surprised. I kind of feel bad, but that she got that shock all at once like that, and have, enough time to process a lot of things.
And so you see her for the first time, and what happens on the call?
Very emotional. She, I go and tell her the whole story. I tell her, obviously my whole name. She was shocked to hear my last name.
What similarities, if any, did you see between the two of you?
I saw, it was more baby pictures that I saw similarities to.
And did she say anything that stands out for you in that first phone call?
The whole phone call stood out.
But it stands out because it was so heartfelt, like she was so moved by the whole experience.
Yeah.
What did it mean to you to find your biological mother? Did you, at this point, you had already found your father. Did you feel even more complete or peaceful, or were you surprised to hear she didn't have any other children?
I'm not really surprised. It was just another, again, it registered to me as just another thing.
What, if anything, surprised you about that first meeting?
Nothing. I had nothing to build on. I didn't, I thought, this meeting with Michael and his family was amazing. They're, kind, loving, giving people. I wonder if I can go 2 for 2 here.
Oh my God.
Or is Angie going to be some crazy crack addict, Obviously it couldn't be further from that, but you think like this could have the potential to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And it obviously was nothing like that. It was amazing.
Were you scared or concerned about anything regarding the meeting other than that she would be just a really difficult person in some way?
I mean, listen, if things got bad with anything, I'd just be like, okay, I'm out. Bye. Like that sort of thing. Like I wasn't really concerned about if things went bad, I'd just break off communication. Mm-hmm. It would have just been like, okay, like I've got a great family. It's not like, I'm just, I didn't really lose anything here. It was just, Michael and Sydney are great. Mm-hmm. At least I'm 1 for 2. Yeah. And, but it was pretty instantaneous after talking to Angie on FaceTime that wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. And there was zero indication that it would be the case. And, it's not like we were doing research and we're like, oh, okay, this is setting off some red flags.
Right.
There was none of that, but it's just always in the back of your mind. I mean, it was the same with Michael. Michael could have been a serial killer. I don't know.
Randy, how did you experience Angie's response following the phone call? Did it surprise you? Were you worried about her?
I was surprised. I was worried, but in hindsight, not as much as I probably should have been. I knew she was having a difficult time. As we've been talking more with you and just amongst ourselves, it was more than just a difficult time.
Yeah.
I think she said she kind of went through a breakdown. And I don't even know what that really means by definition, but I guess I've now observed it. Mm-hmm. She was just depressed. Was her mind, her mind was occupied with those different thoughts. And, she mentioned a couple times reverting back to her 18-year-old self, laying there at night, but with all that said, I compartmentalized things and kind of, went on with my life and worked and just tried to be supportive where I could. And
what was going on for you, Angie?
All I really remember thinking is, please, dear God, please, I beg of you, please don't let him have found his birth father. Let's just have this be our secret. And during that phone call, I found out that I was really the last piece of the puzzle. He had already met his birth father. He'd already found him. They had met. They'd formed a relationship. And at that point, I believe they were really looking forward to their future together. It was another explosion in my brain. For 35 years, the last person in the entire world I ever wanted to find this information out had already found it out.
We go through the whole story and about my life, and then told her that I had already met Michael, and she was even more of a shock. And I remember she told me that she was worried about how she was going to tell Michael, but I had already done it. Not only had I done it, but I had met the entire family.
Oh my God.
And
was she concerned? I mean, I've talked to her about this, but I'm just curious from your perspective, was she concerned about Michael's response?
Yeah. I mean, she did what she thought was the best thing to do at the time. So
how did you feel, Angie, about what Zach told you about Mike's response?
It sounded to me like it was overwhelmingly accepting. I asked him, knowing his full story now, I had said, please, if you're so inclined, please give Michael my phone number. Tell him there's no pressure, but let him know that I know that he knows, and I would like to explain to him why I played God over his life.
You have been listening to the podcast Held. Don't miss the next episode where we talk to Angie and Michael, who share with us the details of their first conversation in over 35 years. Here's a sneak peek.
He called me the next day, and I was not quite sure how that was going to go. He was the most gracious and supportive human being. For someone who had gotten a phone call randomly that you have a son out there and he's 35 and you have grandchildren. The shock that that poor man had to have gone through and the thoughts that must have run through his head. I will never get over that guilt.
I want to take a moment to thank our guests today, Zach, Michael, Angie, Randy, Roshki. It was a pleasure to have you all with us. This is Carrie Offstein-Rosenthal. You have been listening to the podcast Held. We hope you'll follow us and tell all your friends about us. See you next time.
If you or someone you know is considering suicide, please text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or dial 911 in case of an emergency.